Hi guys, welcome back to Techie Smartphone Beginner to Pro Web Design Series. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like and share this video. Hi guys, welcome back to Techie. Previously, we finished our HTML course, and now we are moving into CSS. Alright. So in this CSS course, I would like to create a folder to maintain all the CSS file we're going to do. So I'm going to my Explorer to create a folder sharply. Alright, now that I've created my CSS folder, I can start with my coding. First, we're going to look at CSS implementation, how to add CSS to your design. Alright, so let's go. And remember, any site without CSS is ugly. HTML only without CSS is very ugly. So we're going to make everything beautiful now. So let's go to new file, to my workplace, and I have created a folder called CSS. So all I have to do is to look for the folder and select it. Yep. So I'm starting with CSS implementation. So I'll call it basic.css.html. Okay, so we'll grab our HTML fundamental tags, and in here I'm going to call this basic CSS as my title. All right, so basically we can implement CSS in three different ways. One is an inline, it's called an inline. See, we have an inline CSS, we have internal CSS, and we have external CSS. Now, no matter any of these that you are doing, you must have a HTML file as well. So now we have our HTML file here called basic.html, and we're going to use CSS now. Remember, as we said earlier, HTML on its own is very ugly. What makes your site to look beautiful is the CSS, and we're going to start with the CSS. So I'm going to get three heading tags, and I'll show you how to implement CSS one after the other. Okay, first I'm going to get my first heading. All right, I have three heading file here. If you played it, if you preview it on your screen, this is what you're going to see. So we have the first one, the second one, and the third one. This is on mobile, that is why it's very closer. If you take it to desktop, you can see that it's not that closer. Let me bring it back to mobile. So now we're going to use inline CSS to give the first one a color of red. For the second one, we'll give it a green color using internal CSS. And for the third one, we're going to give it a yellow color using external CSS. So let's go back to our editor. Now, to make use of internal CSS, all you have to do is to add it to your opening tags. So I'm going to separate these three headings. So I will enter to separate them there. Now, all right, we're going to start with the inline CSS. So we comment it. I'm going to comment it here, and I'll call this inline CSS. Now, inline CSS is added to the word, all the style is added to the opening tag. So in our opening tag here, we are going to start by typing style, and the style will be equal to double quotation. Inside these double quotations, this is where we specify the kind of color that the kind of style that we want to give to the element. And I said I'm changing the color to red, so we can do something like this: style equal to double quotation open and close, and inside this double quotation we can start it. So I want to give it a color of red, so we can say color colon red. Okay, you use colon to separate it before you bring what you want to use. All right, now you can end it up by using a semicolon. In this case, we can see come and add another style if you want to add. So you must end it with what? Semicolon is very necessary. Let's preview this on our screen, and you see that it have the color that we just gave it. So this is one thing that you can do. You can use your inline to give a style to your HTML tags. All right, the next one we're going to look at is external CSS, internal CSS. So for this one, we'll use an internal CSS. So I'm going to comment top here and I'll call it internal CSS. All right, let me separate it. All right, this is the one that I want to give it an internal CSS. Internal CSS, the difference between internal CSS and in external CSS is just that internal CSS is still written in internal CSS. You still have to write the code in the header of your HTML file. If it is for external, you need to go to another file, open a new file for the style. You write the style and you come and implement it. Okay, so for this one, for the either internal or external CSS, all you have to do is to give a style attribute to your HTML tag. Okay, like here, I want to give it a style. So all I have to do is to select it. We'll look at that very soon. We'll look at selectors. So we'll look at HTML selectors very soon. So we can give this a selector attribute, like giving it something like class or ID. All right, we're going to use class for this. So I'm going to say class. So you can see we have all that here. I can just select from here. Class will be equal to, let me say, I will call this test one, maybe something like that. Okay. Oh, I will call it test green because I want to give it a green color. All right, this is a class, and whenever you're using two names, it's very advisable you use hyphen to demarcate the two name. Don't use space for it. All right, now we give this a class of test green. You know, if you go to preview it, nothing will happen until you write the code. All you have to do is to go back to your header tag, ensure you write your style in your header tag. So immediately after the style tag, that is when we'll implement this. So we'll open our tag, and it will be a style tag. And this style tag, we can close it and start our coding. Okay, the first thing I need there is to get the class that I have written here. I give it a class of test green. Whenever you're using a class, all you have to do is to make use of dots before you select it. So we can say dots test green. Test green. Now, okay, after this, you are going to open the after this, you are going to open the parentheses. So this is the bracket we are going to use for it, and this bracket is expected to be closed. Now in here is where you write all the command that you want to be implemented to the HTML element. So first, I would like to give it a color. So we can say color, and this color is going to be semicolon. Here you define your color. Let me see, color green, and let's end it and preview. And as you can see, we have a green color attached to the HTML element. So this one is called internal CSS. All right, even from the internal CSS here, you can do a lot of things that are way bigger than what you can do in inline CSS. Though you can do all that in inline CSS as well, but I don't recommend inline CSS because it make your work look somehow box. It's made you not to be able to differentiate between the HTMLs and the CSS. That's why I don't recommend that. All right, we have looked at inline CSS and internal CSS. Finally, we're going to look at external CSS, and in the same way, we have to give it either a class or an ID. So I'm going to comment before it here, and I'll call this external CSS. All right, for external CSS, you have to have your CSS file separate from the HTML file. So before we do this, let me give it a class first before I go. So we're going to give it a class, and the class will be class of test blue. All right, and if you're going to use your external styling, you must know where you are saving this style to. Okay, I'm going to save this style to the main root folder that we are using. We have a CSS folder created for this particular course now. So I'm going to go to the three buttons, click on new file, and as you can see, my workspace is still set to the same storage there, and it's still going to the CSS folder. So I will not disturb myself. I'll just leave it like that. So we can click on file name to write a file name, and that will be done. But I want my CSS file, external file, to be compiled in another folder. That is the right thing to do. And since that is the case, I have to go back to my CSS or my folder there and look for the CSS folder. And once we see the CSS folder, we'll open it. We'll click on the plus button to create a new folder in there for our style. And I'm going to call this CSS. Click on save and we'll select the CSS folder. So our CSS file is going to be saved to the CSS folder. And I'm going to call this style.css. Yeah. What is this style.css? If you're writing your HTML language, you save it in .html. But whenever you want to write language for CSS, you save it in what? In HTML, in CSS. Every languages have their own extension. If we are writing a JavaScript, we'll save it in JS. If we are writing PHP, we'll save it in what? In PHP. If we are writing Python, we'll save it in PY. So all these languages, they have their extension. So we're saving this as style.css. So we'll click on save and we'll have this file created. And don't be confused. If we go back to our Explorer and try to check the CSS folder, you will discover that we now have another folder in it there. You see, we have the CSS folder there and we have the style.css inside the CSS folder. So now let's go back and write a small query. There we give our last heading there a class of text blue, and that is what we want to implement now. So we'll go back to our CSS, and here all we're going to do is to bring the class name, and whenever you're using class, you need to make use of dot. So we'll say text blue. So you can see the keyboard here have changed from HTML to CSS. Okay, what we have is what you can use for your CSS coding. So it's text blue. So for that bracket, I don't need to go inside. I can just select from here, and as you can see, it's open and both close it. All right. So from here now, we can give the color that we want to use. Remember, your class name can be anything. It can be anything. Okay. I'm just using a straight name to understand what I'm doing. It can be anything. You can even use your name to color something. All right. So I'm going to say color and I'll say blue. Even though as I say this is blue, I can make it yellow like this. But I give it a class of text blue, right? I can say my color should be yellow. Then all you have to do is to end it with a semicolon, because you can also have another command down there. All right, we have this in our style.css. If you go back to the basic.html and you try to preview, nothing will happen. As you can see, it's still set to black. All right, and we want it to have the yellow color. Go back to your basic.html. Before you can link an external CSS, you must use a tag, a link tag, to connect your CSS file to your HTML file. We have a file called style.css, and it's in the CSS folder where we have our basic.html in the main root folder. So what I'm talking about here, in our CSS folder, we have basic.html and we have the CSS folder. All right, this CSS folder is where we have our style now, and we want to link them together. All right, let's go back here. To do that, just come down after the title, you make use of the link. So we can say link. And for this link, if you want to make it easy, there is an option for you. I think so. Okay, you have an option here to use your link. All right, so if you want to make it very quick and easy, you can make use of this option and it will write some of the things for you. Because if you are linking, you must have a rel, and the rel will be set to style sheet. And the most important thing to have after the rel is the what? The href. This href, we have looked at href in our HTML so far. You see, we use href for an anchor tag to link two or different pages to themselves. All right, so in our href here, we're going to write our style name. Our style is in CSS folder, so we say CSS, and after the CSS, you use a / to get it from there. The same way we do with our link then. So CSS will get a /, and what we need there is the style, so we say style.css. And after that, we can now go and preview, and you can see, voila, we have the color shown on our screen. That means that our CSS folder, our CSS file is now connected to our HTML. So from there now we can write a lot of comments and all of them will take effect. Like if I want to change the color of the color of the body of my site, it can be very easy. All you have to do is to type body, and whenever you're giving a style to a tag directly, you don't need to give it a class or any other thing. Okay, if I want my body to be colored, for example, I can just select body, or you can type body, then open the parentheses and close it. So inside this parentheses, I can say something like this. I can say background. I can change the background of my body to anything, though it's not ideal. But let's say I want to change the background of my body to something like let me make use of gray. And if we save this and go back to our base.html and preview, you see that the background of our body have changed because our CSS is interacting with the HTML. Thank you.